Hi everyone, this is Mr. Zhang, and today we'll be going over the math homework for Class P. This is for session U15. For question number 1, in a certain game, a player must pay for letters to spell a word. If the letters S and T cost 3 tokens each, and all the other letters cost 1 token each, then what's the cost in tokens of the word 13? So here you have to pay a cost, a couple of tokens to spell out a word. Now S and T cost 3 tokens each. You don't see the letter S in a word 13, so you can ignore that. But since you see a whole bunch of T's, specifically 2 T's, each of those will cost 3 tokens. Now all the other letters cost 1 token each. So HIR will be 3 in total, and then EEN will also be another 3. So if you add everything together, you get choice B, 12 tokens. Next, for question number 2, it says, according to the graph above, the greatest decrease in the funds occurred between which 2 consecutive years? So decrease in this line graph, that tells you about the funds per year, means that it's a sharp drop. So this would be a decrease. And we see that between 2000 and 2001. That's a really sharp drop. So something happened. In choice D, between 2000 and 2001, there was a really big decrease, which means that the money dropped significantly. Next one, number 3, which of the following is equivalent to 3.975312 times 10 to the 4th power? So this is in scientific notation, and for scientific notation, you have to know the powers of 10 to move the decimal point. So this exponent of 4 is positive. So if it's a positive exponent, that means you move to the right. If it's a negative exponent, a negative power of 10, you would have to move to the left. So here we move 4 places to the right. So now the decimal point will be between 3 and 1. And we see that for choice D. The decimal point is between 3 and 1. So the answer is choice D. For scientific notation, one thing to keep in mind, this number in front, called the coefficient, this coefficient must be greater than or equal to 1, but less than 10. All right, next for number 4, in the figure above, line R is parallel to line S, and A is equal to 130 degrees. What's the sum of B, C, D, and E? So we have 2 pairs of parallel lines, which we can mark up using these arrows. So parallel, which is symbolized here, means the lines never touch. And because the lines never touch, we have it set up for a whole bunch of different types of angles. So for example, if we know that angle A is 130 degrees, angle C is also 130 degrees. Angle A and angle C are known as opposite angles. So opposite angles, they form this letter X, and they are equal. Now angle A being 130 degrees means that angle E is also 130 degrees. And that's because A and E form what's called corresponding angles. And for corresponding angles, they're also congruent. They form this letter F. When you have a pair of parallel lines, this angle and this angle, those 2 angles are corresponding and they are equal. And the last one, if angle A is 130 degrees, angle D is also 130 degrees. And that's because angle A and angle D are alternate interior angles. And alternate interior angles are they form this letter Z or this letter N. So we have the letter Z or letter N. This would be alternate interior angles. So that means that we have most of the angles except for angle B. So angle B and angle A, these two angles are supplementary. So supplementary angles, they add up to 180 degrees. So it would be something that looks like this. So these two angles are supplementary. It's a straight line, which means it adds up to 180 degrees. So if angle A is 130 degrees, to get angle B, you would have to do 180 minus 130, which would give you 50 degrees. So now we have all the information to solve for B plus C plus D plus E. So B is 50 degrees, it's a supplement. C, D, and E are all 130 degrees. So if you add everything together, here you have 180, here we have 260. So if you add 260 plus 180 degrees, that would be 440, which is choice A. So a lot of key words here because you have this classic setup with two parallel lines. You have opposite or vertical angles, corresponding angles, which form a letter F, alternate interior angles, which form a letter N, and the supplementary angles, which means it's a straight line. All right, next for question number 5. If the ratio of A to B is 4 to 5 and A is 3 less than B, what is the value of A? So here the keyword is ratio, and ratio means you have to divide. So A divided by B is 4 over 5. Now, the second part says that A has to be 3 less than B. So that means that A is means equals to, and less than means B minus 3. So less than means subtract, but you got to switch the order. So 3 less than B is B minus 3, not 3 minus B. So once you have this, you can take B minus 3 and substitute it in for A. So you know that B minus 3 divided by B is equal to 4 over 5. Or actually rather, instead of substituting in for A, which would eliminate A, we want to solve for A. So since we want to solve for A, it might be better to just add 3 to both sides. So then you have B in terms of A. B is equal to A plus 3. And instead of substituting in for A, we can substitute in for B. That way we will have everything in terms of A. So then we can solve for it. So for the left side, it's going to be A divided by A plus 3 is equal to 4 over 5. Now the other fraction would have worked. The other proportion would have worked. You just had to do one extra step. So this one's a little bit faster. From here, you would cross multiply because this is a proportion. So to solve this proportion, you cross multiply, you would get 5A is equal to 4 parentheses A plus 3. So from here, you would distribute the... So when you distribute, you will get 5A is equal to 4A plus 12. And then you'll have to subtract 4A from both sides, isolate it on the left side. And that'll give you A is equal to 12, which is choice D. Now you can also check your work by substituting back in to solve for B. Now you know that A is equal to B minus 3. So 12 would be equal to B minus 3. You can add 3 to both sides. And you get that B is equal to 15. So once you know B is equal to 15, you can take the ratio of A to B, which would be 12 over 15. And if you divide it by 3, that would give you 4 over 5, which is exactly the original ratio. So everything does check out. Next for number 6, if x is not equal to negative 3 and x squared minus 2x minus 15 divided by x plus 3 is greater than 4, what's the value of x? So here you have to multiply both sides by, or actually you can just factor the numerator. So for the numerator, x squared minus 2x minus 15, you want to factor this. And when you factor this, you want to factor the last digit, which is the constant term. Look for factors of 15, so 1, 15, 3, and 5. That combines to add or subtract to become a negative 2. So that's possible if we use these two numbers, specifically if 3 is positive and 5 is negative. So this would factor to x plus 3 and x minus 5. Now you can always check your work by foiling. So just do the distributive property twice. So first outer, inner last. And remember the sign goes along with the term. When you FOIL, that would be x squared minus 5x plus 3x minus 15. And the middle two terms would simplify to negative 2x, which is exactly what we originally had. So that tells you that it's correct. Now, the numerator becomes x plus 3 and x minus 5, and the denominator is x plus 3. So that x plus 3 will cancel out. So you'll just get x minus 5 is greater than 4, and that's going to be solved just by adding 5 to both sides. When you do that, you get x is greater than 9, and that's choice B. Now you can also check your work by substituting something greater than 9, for example, if x is equal to 10. So if x is equal to 10, the numerator would become 10 squared minus 2 times 10 minus 15. The denominator will be 10 plus 3. So this would be 100 minus 20 minus 15 divided by 13. And that's 100 minus 35, which is 65, divided by 13. And I want to see if that's bigger than 4. Well, 13 times 4 is equal to 52. So 65 is greater than 52. So 65 divided by 13 will be actually equal to 5. So because 65 over 13 is equal to 5, that is greater than 4. Everything checks out. All right, next for number 7, the figure above is composed of congruent right triangles. If the area of ABCD, this really big shape, is 80, what's the area of the shaded region? All right, so this figure is composed of congruent right triangles. Congruent means that all sides and all angles are equal. So if that's the case, then all these triangles are equal pieces. You could just count how many triangles there are. So if you count for just one sector, you can just multiply it by 4. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 triangles. So 8 times 4 will be 32. There are 32 triangles. Now, if the area of the total square is 80, that means that one triangle will be 80 divided by 32. That will be the area. And then all you have to do is count the number of shaded triangles. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So there are 20 triangles. So 20 triangles means that you have to multiply both sides by 20. So that will give you 80 divided by 32 times 20. And all you have to do is simplify this. So 20 and 32, they have a common factor of 4. I'll leave 5 and 8, and then 80 and 8 has a common factor of 10. So the answer will be 10 times 5, or 50. Choice A. The other way to work this out is that the triangles are 5/8 of the total. next for number 8, if I plus 2 times b minus 2 is equal to 0, what the following could be true? So could means that you could find a number, you could find a case that would make this equation true if your numbers will work out and make it equal to 0 in this case, then it could be the answer. So just go through each one and substitute. For Roman numeral number 1, if a is equal to negative 2, then substitute negative 2 in for a. That would be negative 2 plus 2 times b minus 2 is equal to 0. And here, negative 2 plus 2 is equal to 0, so 0 times anything is equal to 0. So everything would check out. Roman numeral 1 could be true. So choice D is eliminated because it doesn't have 1 in it. All right, so let's check Roman numeral number 2. If b is equal to 2, then a plus 2 times 2 minus 2 is equal to 0. Here, 2 minus 2 is equal to 0. So again, a plus 2 times 0 will always be equal to 0 because anything times 0 is equal to 0. So Roman numeral number 2 is also true. A is wrong and C is wrong because they don't have Roman numeral number 2 in it. So now it's just down to choice 3. So if A is equal to negative B. So for Roman numeral number 3, we will replace A with negative B. That would be negative B plus 2 instead of A plus 2 times B minus 2. And you want to see if that's equal to 0. Well, here, B could be equal to anything. So in this case, if B is equal to 2, then this would be negative 2 plus 2 times 2 minus 2. And that's, of course, 0 times 0, which is equal to 0. So that could work because B could be equal to 2 here. It could be equal to anything. There are no restrictions on it. So Roman numeral number 3 is also true. The answer has to be choice E. Again, the key here was just could. Could means that if you find one number, one situation that would make the entire statement true, then that could be possible. So you just use process of elimination for the choices. All right, next for number 9, if f of x and y is equal to x minus y plus 3, then what's f of 6, 4, 2? So this is your function, and a function is just an input-output machine. So for this input-output machine, it's a little different because you take two numbers, x and y, you put it inside this machine, this function f, and it'll spit out an output. And this output is this rule, x minus y plus 3. You take the first number, subtract the second number, and then you add 3. So that's the rule. First number minus second number, and then add 3. Now, in this really complicated function, we actually see there are two functions. So there's two machines. Just like the order of operations, you want to do the function in the middle first, the innermost function, this nested function here. So you'll have to do f of 6, 4 first. So here, just follow the rules. X is equal to 6, y is equal to 4, the first and second numbers. So just follow the rules. Instead of x minus y plus 3, you have 6 minus 4 plus 3. Just substitute x and y into the machine. It gives you 2 plus 3, or 5. Now, you're not done yet because this 5 will replace this innermost function. Now we have to take the output of this innermost function and put it into the first function, f. So now the new function is now f, this original outer f, of instead of 6, 4, you got 5. So now we have to find this new function that has 5 and 2 in it. So that would mean, again, x minus y plus 3. So x is equal to 5, y is equal to 2. So this would be 5 minus 2 plus 3, and that will give you 3 plus 3, or 6. So that's choice C. So you have this function within a function. The output becomes the input here, specifically x. So you have to just follow the rules here. You can't always want to start with the innermost function, just like the order of operations. All right, and here's the summary for this first page. All right, next for number 10, if x is greater than 0, then which of the following is equal to x raised to the 1/2 times x raised to the second power? So here, you have to use the law of exponent that states b to the a times b to the c is equal to b to the a plus c. If you multiply two exponents with the same base, you want to add the exponents. So here, x raised to the 1/2 is really x raised to the 0.5 times x raised to the second power. You'll just add 0.5 plus 2. So that's x raised to the 2.5 power. So exponents can be decimals, that's fine. If you go through all the choices, 2.5 is really 5/2, which is choice E. And here, for this fractional exponent, that's another law of exponent, b to the a over c. The numerator means a power, while the denominator means a root. So this is b to the a to the cube root, or to the c root, or you could do the c root first, and then raise to the a power. So make sure you remember these two laws of exponents. Next, for number 11, which of the following gives the solution set for the equation, the absolute value of x plus 3 divided by 2 is equal to 5? So here you have this absolute value, and absolute value means that depending on whether or not x is positive or 0, or if x is negative, it would mean different things. If x, the stuff inside the parentheses, is positive, the absolute value of x is just equal to x. So nothing happens to it. But if the stuff inside is negative, the absolute value will actually negate the negative number, and it'll turn a negative number positive. And you could turn a negative number positive by multiplying by -1. So here, there are two potential solutions, whether or not the stuff inside is negative or the stuff inside is positive. So if x plus 3/2 is positive, the first case, then the absolute value just goes away. So you can just pretend it doesn't exist, set that equal to 5, and just solve. So you would multiply by 2 on both sides, get rid of the denominator, you get that x plus 3 is equal to 5 times 2, or 10. And then when you subtract 3 on both sides, the x could be equal to 7. So positive 7 is one of the choices. So it could be A, B is going to be wrong, C is going to be wrong, and D is going to be wrong because you need positive 7 as one of the numbers. Now, x plus 3/2 could also be negative. If it's negative, then you'll have to negate this entire fraction. And from here, you can either distribute the -1, because there's a -1 in front of a parentheses, or you can also just divide by -1. Here, if you divide by -1, it doesn't change the equal sign, but just be careful. Sometimes when you divide by 1, if it's an inequality, you have to flip the sign. Fortunately here, you don't have to do that because it's not an inequality, so it's not a big worry. That means that x plus 3 divided by 2 could be equal to -5 if you multiply or divide by -1 on both sides. Then you multiply by 2 on both sides. And that means that x plus 3 would be equal to -10. Then if you subtract 3, that'll give you x as -13. So that would be choice E. Because there are two potential answers, which are both in choice E. So choice E is a set of two numbers, -13 and 7. So this is how you solve for absolute value equations. Again, just be careful if you have an inequality, because if you have an inequality, if you multiply by -1, you gotta flip the sign. All right, so here we're now drawing a scale. The perimeter of triangle XYZ is P. In triangle DEF, DE is equal to EF, and DF is equal to 23. What's a perimeter of triangle DEF? All right, so here you know that at triangle DF, DE is equal to EF. And that DF is equal to 23. So here, you can actually figure out that both of these triangles are isosceles triangles. So isosceles means that two sides are equal, and the base angles are also equal as well. Now, when you have this case, for triangle XYZ, since this angle is equal to this angle, the opposite sides are also going to be equal. In this case, it will be equal to 10. So the perimeter of triangle XYZ is actually equal to 23. Now for triangle DEF, we know that these two sides, DE and EF, are equal, and that DF is equal to 23 as the length. So that means that these opposite angles are also going to be equal as well. Now, to figure out the perimeter of triangle DEF, there's not much else to go on, because we don't know if they're similar. We don't know if these two triangles are related in any way. So there's actually missing information here, because we can't really figure out that this triangle is even related. The second triangle is related to the first one. So again, there seems to be some missing information. It looks like this triangle is equilateral, but we can't really tell without any additional information. So really just no answer here. All right, next for number 13. In a certain library, there are 5 bookcases with S shelves in each bookcase. If a total of B books is to be distributed among each of the shelves, what is the number of books per shelf? So here you can substitute these variables with random numbers, or you can just use algebra here. So there are bookcases with S shelves in each bookcase. So each means multiply or divide. In this case, it's going to be multiply because we want the total. So the total shelves is going to be R times S, because it's R bookcases, S shelves in each bookcase. Now you have the total number of books, which is B, and you want to distribute them equally for the shelves. If you have B books and you have RS shelves, you'll want to divide these two numbers. B books divided by RS shelves will give you choice A, and that will give you the books per shelf. The units help out as well. Per means divide, so our units are going to be books over shelves. And that's B over RS. For number 14, Becky opened a savings account that earns a fraction of X of its balance in interest every year. 3 years ago, Becky deposited $800 into the account, and has not deposited or withdrawn any money since. If she earned $126.10 in interest, what's the value of X? So here the keyword is interest, and interest represents the extra money the lender gets from the borrower. In this case, you are the borrower. You are the lender, and you're giving money to the bank. So the bank is borrowing money from you. So for interest, the bank will give you some extra money each year. In this case, X percent or X this fraction. Now, interest is actually compounded, in this case, yearly. So each time you earn money, $800, you have to get X percent. So you add X of the 800. So then you add that to itself. So you have 800 plus X of 800, or X times 800, I should say. But then the next year you get another X percent. So then you'll have this original plus X times 800 plus 800X. So you have to keep distributing this way. So it gets kind of annoying if you do this 3 times to get to just 126. Or rather 800 plus $126.10. So we can actually model this, just approximate it using what's called simple interest. And for simple interest, the formula is I equals PRT. So I is interest, P is principal, the starting money, R is the rate, the interest rate, and this is a decimal, and T is the time in years. So we're using this to get an approximate because the choices are pretty far away from each other. 1/4 is 25%. This is 20%. 1/10 is 10%. D is 5%, and this is 4%. So if you substitute in, the interest that you get is $126.10. That's equal to the principal, or $800, times the rate, which we don't know, times the time is 3. So you'll actually need a calculator here because you have to do 126.10 divided by 800 and divided by 3. So that's 126.10 divided by 2,400. And that's going to give you a rate of approximately 0.0525, which is about 5%. And that's going to be choice D, 1/20, which is about 5%. Now, the formal way of solving this, now that we can kind of work backwards to kind of check your work, is that you have to take the original 800%, and each time you add 5% of your money, you're really multiplying by 1.05%, or rather 1.05. So you have to do this 3 times because you have 3 years. So each time you earn money, you can also earn interest on that money. So the final answer will be 800 times 1.05 cubed, and that's equal to 800 plus that 126.10. So the total is 926.10. So this is that formula that you actually need to solve. Again, you don't know that X, so you have to do 800 times 1 plus this fraction X cubed is equal to 926.10. So to solve for this, you would need to divide by 800, and then you have to cube this number, which is obviously not going to be it's going to be a weird decimal here. So you'll need a calculator. So 926.10 divided by 800 is equal to 1.157625. And if you cube both sides, you got 1 plus x will be equal to 1.05. And you subtract 1, you'll get that x is equal to 0.05, or 1/20. So that's how you would solve this. Again, you need a calculator because there's no way you can cube this number by hand anyway. So again, for number 14, you'll definitely need a calculator to solve for this, but we just use a simple interest formula to approximate it because the choices are pretty close. But you'll definitely need a calculator to solve this the formal way using this equation. All right, next for number 15, in the figure above, two identical squares, ABCD and EFGH overlap, and I is the midpoint of line AD. So that's this point here, so these 2 points are equal. And then J is the midpoint of CD. Now, if square ABCD has an area of 64, what's the area of the shaded region? So everything got cut in half. So if an area of 64, it means the side is equal to 8. To each of these will be 4. So each of these sides will be equal to 4. And since everything's super symmetric, you can kind of just cut everything in half. So you see that the shaded region is made up of 3 squares in the middle. So 4 times 4 is going to be 16, 16, 16. And then what you also have are these 2 triangles, which forms a square. So you have 2 more squares on the right and also the left. So that's another 16 and 16. So this is 16 times 5, or 80, choice E. All right, and here's the summary for this page. Okay, next for number 1, if 0.08x is equal to 0.032, then what's the value of x? So here to solve for x, you have to divide by 0.08 on both sides, or 0.008. So here you have to move the decimal point 3 places to the right, and that'll give you 32 over 8, which is equal to 4. Choice D. Next for number 2, what's the value of b if 5 times b plus 10 is equal to 7 times b minus 4? So to solve for b, you have to distribute first. And remember, when you distribute, you include the sign. So you have 5b plus 50 is equal to 7b minus 28. To solve for b, you subtract 5b on both sides, so that b is to the right. And you have to add 28 on both sides. That'll give you 78 is equal to 2b. For the last step, you divide by 2, and you get that b is equal to 39, which is choice A. Next one, number 3, isosceles triangle ABC, shown above, has an area of 4. If the measure of angle A and the measure of angle C is equal to the measure of angle C, what's the area, or what's the coordinate of point B? So angle A is equal to angle C, which means that this is an isosceles triangle. And for isosceles triangles, 2 sides are equal, and their opposite angles are also equal as well. So here, the other fact of an isosceles triangle is that you can draw an altitude that's the perpendicular bisector. So for all isosceles triangles, this altitude is called a perpendicular bisector, which means that it cuts the opposite side in half. And it's also perpendicular, so it makes a right angle to it. So that means that the 2 opposite sides are equal. In this case, 2, 0 and 4, 0 gets cut in half. So this point has to be 3, 0. So this middle point is 3, 0, We can then use this to eliminate choices C, D, and E, because point B needs to have 3 as the x. Now to solve for the y coordinate, we can actually solve this using the area. The area is 4. So the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. We know that the base is equal to 2, and the area is equal to 4. So if you substitute everything in, you get the equation 4 is equal to 1/2 times 2 times h. Well, 1/2 and 2 cancels out. So you get that the height has to be equal to 4, which means that the y coordinate of B has to be 4 as well. So that's going to be choice B. Next for number 4, if 3x is equal to, if the absolute value of 3x minus 6 is equal to 36, what's one possible value for x? So here, again, you see absolute value. And for absolute value, if the stuff inside is positive or 0, then the absolute value of x, which is equal to x, it goes away. But if x is less than 0, then the absolute value of x would be the negative of x. So when you negate a negative number, it turns positive. So here, 3x minus 6 inside an absolute value could mean 2 different possibilities. If 3x minus 6 is positive, and if 3x minus 6 is negative. So the positive one is easy, because the absolute value just goes away, and that's equal to 30. So 3x minus 6 is equal to 36. You can add 6 to both sides. You get that 3x is equal to 42. And if you divide by 3, you get that x is equal to 14. Not negative 14, positive 14. So I don't see that here. That means you have to try the other case, which is the negative case. Now, if 3x minus 6 is negative, that means that you have to negate this entire expression inside the absolute value, and that will give you positive 36. You can either divide both sides by -1, because it's an equal sign, or the preferred way is actually to distribute this -1. And it's a little tougher, but you definitely need to distribute when you're doing an inequality. So I think before, for a previous question, I just divided by -1. You can also solve this by distributing. So I'll try, I'm going to use a distributive method here. If you distribute -1 to 3x, you get -3x. You distribute -1 to -6, you get positive 6. And that's equal to positive 36. From here, you can subtract 6 on both sides and get that -3x is equal to 30. Then you can divide by -3 on both sides to get that x is equal to -10. So that's choice C. Now you should always check your work here. So if we're saying that x is equal to -10, then the absolute value of 3 times -10 minus 6 should be equal to 36. And 3 times -10 is equal to -30. And -30 minus 6 will give you the absolute value of -36, which is equal to positive 36. So everything does check out. So again, for absolute value, you have 2 choices here. So make sure you consider both of the possibilities. And we also did a distribution of -1 instead of a dividing by -1 strategy. Next, for number 5, if 20% of x is 10, what is x% of 10? So just turn the word sentence to a number sentence. 20% means divide by 100. So we're going to do 20 divided by 100. Of means multiply. So we're multiplying by x. And is means equals to. So it's equal to 10. Now to simplify this, 20 over 100 is 1/5. So 1/5 of x is equal to 10. You can multiply both sides by its reciprocal, which is 5. To get the x by itself, and x is equal to 50. But we're not done yet, because you want x% of 10. So that means you want to find 50% of 10. And 50% just half. So half of 10, or half times 10, is equal to 5. So the answer is choice E, 5. So for number 6, 5 people stand in line. 3 men, Denzel, Melvin, and Anit, and 2 women, Janine and Susan. The order in which they stand must match the following conditions. So a man is not first in line. Denzel is ahead of Janine. A woman must stand fourth, and Melvin cannot stand next to Denzel. So what position does Melvin stand in line? So here you just draw your 5 slots for first and then fifth. So a man can't be first. So first has to be either J or S. Now, for number 2, Denzel is ahead of Janine. So if Denzel's ahead of Janine, that means that Janine can't be first, because if Janine's first, then Denzel can't be ahead of that. So Susan must be first. And then Denzel must be ahead of Janine. So it could be D space J or D space J. So we don't know where they are. We don't know how far ahead Denzel is. Now, a woman must be fourth in line. There's only one other person here, so J has to be here. Then these two has to be second, or third has to be Denzel. And Melvin can't stand next to Denzel. So no matter where Denzel is, either second or third, Melvin can't be second or third, so Melvin has to be last, choice E. And the middle two has to be either D and then A, or A and then D. We can't tell which one is which. But we know Susan is first, Janine is fourth, and Melvin is last. So the answer is choice E here, just by using the process of elimination. Next, for number 7, Marcus can complete a job in 3/4 of an hour. How long in minutes does it take Marcus to complete 3 jobs? So one job is 3/4 of an hour. That's 45 minutes. Remember, 1 hour is 60 minutes. So 3/4 of an hour will be 3/4 of 60, or 45. So that's for one job. You want to know how long it takes to do 3 jobs, so you just want to multiply by 3. And that will give you 135 minutes. And that's choice C. Next, for number 8, if f of x is equal to 4 times the square root of x minus 3 plus 7, what's domain of f of x? So domain means all possible x values. So think about what inputs you can put into this function. And just be wary when you have domains, be wary of fractions, because you can't divide by 0, and be wary of square roots. So just be careful of square roots and denominators. The reason why we look for denominators is because you can't divide by 0. So that's going to put a restriction on the domain of the input of this function. And the reason why we look for square roots is because you can't do the square root of a negative number. So both of these rules, these cardinal rules of math, are restrictions. So we see a square root here. So that means that the square root, everything underneath the square root, x minus 3, has to be greater than or equal to 0. It has to be positive. So to solve for this, just add 3 to both sides. X, this input, this domain, has to be greater than or equal to 3. So that's choice B. You can't put x equals -2, x equals 0. You can't put x equals -5, because that would violate this rule that you can't do a square root of a negative number. So just look for these restrictions here when you have the domain. So look for, again, square roots and denominators. Specifically, you can't take the square root of a negative number, and you can't divide by 0. Next one, number 9, if w is a positive odd integer, which of the following gives a possible value of the product of 1 more than W and 2 less than W. So here you want to know product. So product means multiply. For these two things, 1 more than W, that's W plus 1. And the second thing is 2 less than W, so that's W minus 2. And W is a positive odd integer, so W has to be stuff like 1, 3, 5, 7, etc. So remember, integer is a whole number. So there aren't that many restrictions here, so just substitute W equals 1. That would be 1 plus 1, or 2 times negative 1. So this would be negative 2. That's not it. The next number is 3. So this would be 4 times 2, which is 8. Again, I don't see that as a choice. I try 5. That would be 6 times 3, which is 18. And I do see that in choice C. Just keep following this pattern. I think if you look at a pattern, it's add 10. So W is equal to 7. That would be 8 times 5. Which would be 40. All right, so never mind, scrap that. That is not add 10. Because that's adding 22. So there's really no pattern here. You just have to test it out. All right, and here is the summary for this page. Next, for number 10, after selling a third of the muffins he made for the school bake sale, Alan then sold an additional 10 muffins, leaving him with half of the number of muffins he started with. How many muffins did Alan start with? So we don't know how many muffins he started with, but he sold 1/3 of them. So you could say he started with X. The first thing he did is he sold 1/3 of X. So that means he has 2/3 left. But the second thing is he sold an additional 10. So sold 10 more. That means he has 2/3 of X left minus 10. So that's how much he has left. And we're told that this is equal to half of the number of muffins he started with. So 2/3 of X minus 10 is equal to 1/2 of X. And this is the equation that we have to solve. So to solve for this equation, you can add 10 to both sides and then subtract 1/2 X. And when you subtract 2/3 minus 1/2, the LCD here is 6. So that's 4/6 minus 3/6, which is 1/6. So you're left with 1/6 of X is equal to 10. To solve for X, you can multiply both sides by 6. The reciprocal, and you get that X is equal to 60. Choice D. For number 11, Ruth opened a restaurant this year, and she wants to open 4 more next year, and 16 her third year. Her plan is to quadruple the number of restaurant openings every year. Which of the following represents the number of restaurants she plans to open in N years? So this is called a geometric function because you keep multiplying by a constant to get to the next number. So you have 1 restaurant, then 4, then 16, then 64, etc., etc., etc. So here you see that you keep multiplying by 4. That's a pattern. So for this geometric function, g of n, the nth year, or the nth number, will be a times r raised to the n minus 1 power, where a is the starting number. In this case, it's 1. R is the common ratio, which is the number you multiply by each time, which in this case is 4. And n is the term number, or in this case, it's the year. Now you have to subtract 1 because to get to the second number, for example, you have to multiply by 4 just once to to get to the third number, you have to multiply 2 times. These two. To get to the fourth number, you have to multiply 3 times. So again, your counting number jumps, you don't count the first number, which is why you have to subtract 1 for the exponent. So this is the general form of a geometric sequence. So you just substitute in. Here, g of n will be equal to 1 times 4 raised to the n minus 1 power, which is choice A. So this is the general format of a geometric sequence. And the answer is A. Next, for number 12, if r is a positive even integer and s is a prime integer, then all the following are factors of the product rs except 4. So r is a positive even integer and s is a prime integer. So if s is prime, that means that it only has 2 factors, just 1 and itself. And r is a positive even integer. So all the following would be factors except for one of them. So rs, of course, you can separate this into r and s, because r times s is equal to this rs as a factor tree. So a and b, they're going to be gone. Now 2 is always a factor because r is even. Eventually, you'll break r down into 2 because r is even. So that's out. Now s times 2, this is also a factor because this 2 comes from r. And this s comes from, of course, s. So that leaves choice D cannot be a factor. And the reason why B can't be a factor is because the R comes from 2, and this R, they kind of coincide, they conflict with one another. When you have R times S and you break it down, if you break down R and S into R times S, this R will eventually break down to 2. But you won't have an R left over because you already broke down the R. So there's a contradiction for choice D. You can also just plug in numbers here. So if you check your work, you can make R equal to, let's say, 4 and S equal to 3. That's a prime number. So R times S is equal to 12. If you list all the factors of 12, one of them won't show up. And in this case, it's choice D. If R is equal to 4, choice D is 2 times R, which is 2 times 4 for our case, which is 8. 8 is not a factor of 12. That's impossible. So this would be wrong. All the other choices would be okay. 2 is a factor, or excuse me, 4 is a factor of 12, 3 is a factor of 12, 2 times S is 6, that's a factor of 12, and choice E, 2 is of course a factor of 12. So we can eliminate A, B, C, and E. Only choice D is left. Even if you do the plugging in method. For number 13, in the figure above, AGF, BEF, and CD are all isosceles right triangles. If BE is equal to 2x and both GF and ED is x root 2, what's the value of AC? So isosceles right triangles are 45, 45, 90 right triangles. So it means that 2 sides are equal and the angles here are 45 degrees. Now BE, you're given is 2 times x. So that means that BF is also 2x. And now GF and ED are both x root 2. For an isosceles right triangle, the ratio of the sides are, in fact, x, x, and x root 2. for this 45, 45, 90 right triangle. So if ED and GF are the hypotenuse, that means that AG and AF are X. So to find the length of AC, we can actually separate this into smaller triangles here. For example, AC is, let me redraw this. AC is the hypotenuse of this triangle with AB as the leg and BC as the leg. So if you add 2x plus x, that would be 3x. And that's the same for BC. So you want the hypotenuse. You can use Pythagorean theorem, or since they're both 45, 45, 90 degrees, you can use this fact here. This would be 3x root 2, which is choice A. So essentially, you just have to know that an isosceles right triangle has the sides of a ratio x root 2. So it's one of these special right triangles here. Next for number 14, if 1,000 cubic meters of pine mulch can fertilize 0.02 square kilometers of soil, how many square kilometers of soil can be fertilized by 10 to the 8 cubic meters of pine mulch? So 1,000 meters cubed is 0.02 square kilometers of soil. And you have 10 to the 8, or 1 followed by 8 zeros. So it's 100 million cubic meters will be X square kilometers of soil. So you can just multiply both sides. Here, if you look at the zeros, you have to multiply by 10,000. So you have to multiply the right side by 10,000 as well. So when you have 0.02 multiplied by 10,000 with 4 zeros, you move the decimal to the right 4 times. So that would be, 5 times. I multiply by 100,000. So that would be choice C, 2,000. So the key to 14 was to choose either side of a proportion or ratio, and just counting zeros. Just make sure you count correctly. Next for number 15, if the ratio of A to B is equal to the ratio of 2A to B, and B is not equal to 0, which of the following must be true? So if you have two equivalent ratios, that's your proportion. Then to A over B is equal to 2A over B. And from here you can cross multiply. Then we get that AB is equal to 2 times AB. So if you subtract AB on both sides, you get that 0 is equal to AB. So either A equals 0 or B is equal to 0. Now B is in the denominator. That can't be equal to 0. We're given B is not equal to 0. So therefore A has to be equal to 0. And that's choice 2. So that's going to be choice B. Now if B is equal to 0, or excuse me, if A is equal to 0, then for example in Roman numeral 1, this would be 2 times 0 or 0. And we know that B can't be equal to 0. If Roman numeral number 1 is true, that contradicts the fact that B is not equal to 0, so we can eliminate that. And for Roman numeral number 3, if you subtract B on both sides, you get that B is equal to 0. And that can't be true. So there's a contradiction for 1 and 3. Only choice 2 is true. So the answer has to be B. And here's the summary for this page. Next one, number 16. If the graph of f of x is shown above, what's the x-intercept the graph of f raised to the x, f of x minus 2. So if you subtract 2 inside the parentheses, this is a transformation of a graph. This would be 2 units shifted to the right. So when you shift this 2 units to the right now the intercept, you have to count by the scale is by 2s. You will shift this 2 units to the right, so that this graph would look like this. And the x-intercept will go from -4 to choice C, -2. So you have to know the transformations of functions. And if you have a change inside the parentheses, it's kind of like in the opposite direction. If you add 2 to the x, you actually have to shift 2 left. That's because you're changing the inputs, not the outputs. Whereas if you have f of x plus 2 and f of x minus 2 on the outside of the parentheses, this would be up, and minus 2 would be down, because you're changing the y. Be careful if you're changing the x. It's sort of like the opposites. Next, for number 17 in the figure above, B is the midpoint of AC, and D is the midpoint of CE. F is the midpoint of AE, and G is the midpoint of BD. Now, if AF is equal to 4 and CB is equal to CD, both of those are equal, what is F to G? So here AF and FE have to be equal, so they're both equal to 4. And here we know that this is equal to 60 degrees. And since these two are, you have isosceles triangles here, the opposite sides of these congruent sides are also equal, so that means that this has to be equilateral. Once you know that this is equilateral, you can figure out that everything about this triangle is an equilateral triangle, and the sides are equal to 8. So for the top triangle, it's going to be exactly half, because everything got cut in half. It's going to be 4, 4, and 4, which means that for F to G, to find this height, you want to figure out the height of this equilateral triangle. And when you cut an equilateral triangle in half, you actually make two 30, 60, and 90 triangles. So for this top triangle, for BCD, for this 30, 60, 90 right triangle, this is your special right triangle here. The sides are in a ratio of x, 2x, and x root 3. So this height here is going to be 2 root 3 because the x corresponds with this 2. So if this top piece is 2 root 3, the bottom piece is also going to be 2 root 3. So that's choice B, because the bottom triangle is double the first one. Next, for number 18, in the figure above, square ABCD is inscribed in the circle. The perimeter of ABCD is 4. What's the circumference of the circle? So the perimeter of ABCD is 4. So the perimeter of a square is 4 times the side. So that means that the side has to be equal to 1. And because this square is inscribed in this circle, the diagonal of the square is the diameter of the circle. And since it's a square, you know that a diagonal splits up a square into two 45, 45, 90 right triangles. So this is the other special right triangle with sides of x, x, x root 2. In this case, x is equal to 1. So that means that the hypotenuse will be x root 2, or 1 root 2, which is just root 2. So the circumference of a circle is 2 pi r or just pi d. Since the diameter is equal to root 2, this is just going to be root 2 times pi, or twice d. Next, for number 19, what's the value of negative 3 times a squared times b to the fifth raised to the third power? Here we have to distribute this 3 to everything inside the parentheses. It's this law of x1, a times b raised to the c power is a to the c times b to the c. So it's negative 3 cubed times a squared cubed times b to the fifth cubed. And then we have to use power to a power. B to the a raised to the c power is b to the a times c. So have to multiply the exponents here, which will give you a to the sixth and b to the 15th. And then negative 3 cubed is negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, which is negative 27, because you have a negative number to an odd power is going to be negative. So these are the 3 rules that you have to use, and that's going to help you get to choice D. Next, number 20, if 3y to the fourth plus xy minus x squared is equal to y squared minus 25, and y is equal to 0, how many possible values of x are there? So y is equal to 0, so just substitute in. And we were to see y, that would mean that 0 plus 0 minus x squared is equal to 0 squared minus 25. Or negative x squared equals negative 25. If you multiply both sides by negative 1, you get that x squared is equal to 25. And from here, you know that x is equal to positive or negative 5. Choice C. Remember, the official way to solve this is to set this equal to 0 by subtracting 25. And this is your difference of 2 squares. So that's x plus 5 and x minus 5. So x plus 5 could be equal to 0, or x minus 5 could be equal to 0. So x would be negative 5, or x equal to positive 5. So there are 2 answers. So that's why the answer is choice C. Okay, and here's the summary for this page. All right, thank you everyone for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. All right, bye everyone.